Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Sending a warm welcome to everyone here with us. My name's Nadia and I'm the Data and Reporting Officer at QCOS. I'll be facilitating the Research and Evaluation Network with Amy this year. And today we're here to talk about data management fundamentals. So the session will include valuable information about concepts and principles of good data management and documentation practices for the community service sector. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of this land, the oldest continuing cultures, diverse languages, and knowledge holders in human history. I am joining you from Meanjin, Brisbane, and I respectfully acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people and all First Nation colleagues and friends online in the webinar today. For those online in the meeting today, please feel free to join us in acknowledging country where you are through the chat function. I would also like to acknowledge that today is the 17th anniversary of the National Apology to the Stolen Generations. This day marks the anniversary of this significant event where on the 13th of February in 2008, Prime Minister Kevin Rudd apologised on behalf of the nation for the mistreatment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who were forcibly removed from their families and communities, which we know as the Stolen Generation. This is a significant day to reflect on this historical injustice and the continued effects and intergenerational trauma caused by the forced removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from their families, communities, and culture. I acknowledge and pay my respect to the strength and resilience of the Stolen Generation survivors. So the agenda for today's session is the presentation by David Alzamendi, followed by a Q&A, and then we'll have a poll to gather some feedback, go over some research and evaluation network terms of reference membership and resources, and then share with you some upcoming events. A few housekeeping things to note. By default, you will be on mute, but your camera will be turned on. The session will be recorded, and if during the session you'd like to ask a question, you can write the question in the chat function. If we run out of time, we can follow up with you individually after the session. Just pop questions and comments into the chat pane. As the world of AI is ever evolving, there is an increasing potential presence of AI bots like Read AI in our webinars. The presence of these bots can potentially lead to privacy concerns by harvesting information and distributing session content. We will stay vigilant in removing these bots from our meetings, but ask if you see either an AI bot or shared material to please let us know. So I would like to now welcome and introduce our guest speaker for today, David Alzamendi. David is a seasoned data expert and community leader. He is the managing director at Level Up Your Data, and his passion for data-driven solutions with his extensive professional experience allow him to help organizations improve their data management practices. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Nadia, for that. Let me share my screen and we'll kick off. Right. So data management, how can we make this like a fun topic, right? We'll see. We have 50 minutes ahead. Look, this topic is really close to my heart. But before we kick off, I have to say like a thank you to Nadia and Amy for putting this event together and actually the agenda for 2025. I think it's a great initiative. A lot of work goes into putting these events. And I hope like, as you have any questions, just put them in the chat. And yes, data management. This is really cool. So we're going to cover it from a perspective of the data management framework. There is a book that I'm going to mention as we go across the different slides. But yeah, let's get started. I believe that's the best way to do it. So a little bit about me. I've been doing data management for quite a while. Always been doing data management. My expertise will be in the data analytics space, but as I matured as a professional, I had the need to learn a little bit about the foundations. and so on. I'm joining today from the land of the Ninji people here in Redcliffe. I'm originally from Argentina, but now I consider myself an Australian. So, look, I think I've seen it all, and I've done a lot of things. The challenges that we've seen in the data management industry in Australia are the same challenges that they have in the US, in Europe, in other countries. So the agenda for today, I guess, is for you to have, when we finish this presentation, to understand a little bit more about the data management fundamentals, also about the data management, the DMBOK framework, and how to use some of those tools that are part of that framework, okay? So we'll do a short intro. We'll talk about the drivers for doing data management. We're going to visit the framework. I think that's the most important item for today. DMBOK and a few recommendations that I guess, I always give them across any data project. Hopefully they are valuable to you. So let's get started with the challenges. So when you think of challenges, right? We're going to mention a few of them here, and want you to put in the chat actually the number of the challenge that you are experiencing, or as well, if there is something that we missed, just put it in the chat. So the first one, of course, is that data is scattered across multiple systems. We've seen this even within the community services industry. There are potentially up to more than 30 data management database providers or software providers, call it that way, right? And as you know, you will have your CRM system, and you will have a different system for doing marketing. So all your data, the data of your customers, the data of the organization is spread across multiple systems. And that in many cases, it makes it really hard to drive efficiencies within your organization. Then this one, all of us were familiar with. The second one that is really close to our community services industry is I guess the lack of investment resources time. And we've seen this, right? So most of our organizations, they don't have a team of 30, 40 data practitioners looking at the data management practice, right? Hopefully, best scenario, we sometimes have 2 or 3 people creating reports, building analytics. Then maybe we have a resource looking at the data management, data governance. That's common across our industry. That's the reality. So when you think of the lack of investment resources and time, I want you to think of trying to be as efficient as possible as well. How can we do the most with the resources that we have? The next challenge is the lack of common terminology, lack of benchmarking and standards, or maybe our organization not following a specific or recommended best practices, guidelines, or framework. I think that's a common one. Also, within the organization, you know this as well as me, that in different teams, they talk about the same subject, but with different names. You've seen this. The employee turnover doesn't make things easier for us, so we know that we have to cope with this. So every time that an employee leaves, with a new colleague comes on board, we need to make sure that we have really strong onboarding processes to solve this challenge. Not enough documentation. I encourage you to write documentation, take advantage of some of the new generative AI tools that are available out there. Use the flavor of your choice, but I've seen a big change and shift on how to write documentation. Before, we were considering that writing documentation could be time-consuming, waste of time, but there has to be a minimum on writing it. So not enough documentation. And let's finish, of course, on driving an outcome of our data analytics investment. And of course, data quality will be the last one. So go and put in the chat if you haven't done it already. So I want you to put in the chat, what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? And if it's not there in the screen, let us know. Also, Amy just shared a link that is quite valuable. So because the document, the paper that was published back in 2021, it already mentions some of the challenges that you see here in the screen. Now, as a data practitioner, I travel around the world, I give presentations, I've been in Europe, in the US. I have a lot of online meetings with my colleagues in different countries. And the challenges that you see here in this slide, they are common across community services in different countries, but as well, they are common across different industries within Australia. Certainly, having a data management approach for doing things in the organization is going to help mitigate some of these challenges in many cases. And that's the idea for today, I guess. So by looking at the challenges that you have right now in the screen, let's look at how we can approach data management within our organization to try to minimize the risk of some of the challenges here. I see as well in the chat some of the other challenges is low IT literacy of staff. Data literacy is a big component that has to be taken into account. Out of date information, we can put that as part of data quality. The data is not up to date, it's old, it hasn't been updated in a while. And I'll mention one more from Simon as well, data security as well, right? So you've seen during 2024 how many challenges we had in Australia with data breaches, leaks, different providers exposing our personal information. And I think this has to be taken into account because it's the only good news that we can say that the only good outcome that we got from the data breaches in 2024, some of the new technologies related to generative AI will be actually that now leadership is more literate. So they understand actually that they have to invest on doing data management. So what are some of the key drivers for doing data management? Are you getting a lot of feedback from? Does sound good? Yeah. Okay, good. Nice. Okay, let's look at some of the drivers. The first one is a strategy, right? And I think this is the most important one. Let's stop here for a second. Your organization has a strategy. It might be written, or it might be known only by leadership. That's the reality. There is something that your organization is offering the community. There is a plan for improving the services that you're offering, for improving the experience of the internal and external customers. And you really want to, when you're doing data management, you really want to plug into those goals, essentially. The second one is data alignment, which essentially means that every time that you start a project, you're running a new project for deploying a new tool, you are doing a change of version of a tool, you're, as an example, you're doing a project for releasing new products. All of those projects, they have a data component to it. So you want to make sure that your data is aligned with the projects that you're trying to deliver, but as well with the organizational goals, and that you keep some control on those data components. So control is really important. I always say that, look, if you are not controlling your data, at least you have to you want to be aware of what are some of the risks that you are running by not controlling your data. so you can make an informed decision. The fourth organizational driver will be IT alignment. Data practitioners, and there are multiple roles as such, but they're basically, you want to be the bridge between the business and IT. So you want to make sure that you have the resources in-house, and I'm sure you already have them, to translate business functional requirement into data or IT requirement. And this happens a lot as part of running a project as well. And the last organizational driver will be the change. So data can act as an agent for change, transformation, and agility. It was mentioned before in the chat that one of the challenges in our industry is the lack of IT literacy in our organization. And having that as a driver certainly can help you foster a better data management culture. These 5 drivers, the strategy, data alignment, control, IT alignment, and change, are the main organizational drivers within the data management practice. But let's step back for a second. If we have to define what data management is, it's essentially the development and execution and supervisions of plans, policies, programs, and practice that deliver control, perfect, and enhance the value of data and information assets throughout the life cycles. This is the definition of the framework that we're going to talk about today. So you also have to consider that a data management professional is any who works in any facet of data management. And that is going to widen the scope further than IT professionals. So anybody who is essentially creating, defining, or consuming data could be considered themselves a data management professional. And by doing that, you are encouraging our employees to take more responsibility. And it'll be up to the data practitioners, the data analytics team or the IT team within your organization to help increase data literacy in the organization. So this is the common definition for data management. This is from the DMBOK framework that we're going to visit today. And it's a good definition to have a common definition and terminology within your organization. But let's talk about the goals of data management before we jump into a framework. The first one, as you know, the most common one, besides data security, is to help stakeholders or business users to make informed decisions. That's one of the key goals. Leadership, they've been making decisions for a long time to drive the organization to new standards and to achieve goals. But if we're able to get to a point that they can make those informed decisions based on high data quality data, we're giving them the tools that they need to make better decisions, essentially. The second one, the second goal is capturing, storing, and protecting and ensuring the integrity of those data assets, as you know. And this comes as part of data security as well. So data security now is not optional anymore within our organizations. Now it has become a mandatory requirement, a mandatory capability that it has to be looked after, there has to be investment. And as part of the data security as well, you can try to achieve a lot of different independent goals. The third goal, as it was mentioned before by one of our colleagues in the chat, is ensuring that there is high quality of information. When we talk about data quality, don't only think about data completeness, or somebody who has spelled a word incorrectly in the system. Think about the information not being available as well in time because one of our processes failed. So the information is not available today. Think about anything that creates some sort of challenge on consuming that information. It can be considered as well data quality. The fourth one, really close to what we do, is ensuring that we apply privacy to our data. This comes when you're defining different levels of data privacy. Many of you, maybe you have already confidential data, internal data, you have public data. So make sure that you go and define different levels for classifying the data. Most of the tools nowadays within the major cloud providers, they will offer you tools that you can use to classify that information. And the fifth one and sixth one is basically making sure that you're preventing unauthorized access to your data. So you want to define, you really want to have a policy that defines how you're going to give access to the information within the organization, and how you're going to use the data for adding value to your organization. So that's the last one. So let me have a quick look at the chat to see if we have any questions. So now that we have the definition and we have some of the goals, I'd like to introduce a framework. I got to know this framework actually back in 2019. So this is essentially almost 10 years after I started my career in the data space. So I ran into this framework. I thought, okay, there has to be something that I can use to make sure that I'm following a specific set of guidelines, best practices, and recommendations. There had to be something. Before that, I was using the best practices recommended by the different technology providers. Think of Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, Google. So I was using their recommendations. But then I thought, okay, there has to be something that is technology agnostic. And that's the data management framework. And the framework, remember, is just a set of guidelines, principles, best practices, and recommendations that you can use to drive your data management practice. This framework actually has been there for a long time. There are many data practitioners working on spreading the word of the data management framework. And other examples, when you think of frameworks, you can think of the project management book of knowledge. You can think of the accountants that they become CPA certified. They have to follow a specific best practices, recommendations, and guidelines. There's always change management frameworks. So it's not the lack of frameworks that is our problem. It's our lack of understanding how to use those frameworks, or sometimes, to even know, like me, that there is a framework available out there for us to use. I'd like to know if actually you know about the DMBOK. Have you heard about the data management book of knowledge? Just put in the chat, just put a yes or no for me to get an understanding on where you are at. So if you know the framework or no, put in the chat. Okay, we have a few yes and a few no's. Okay, that's great. So thank you for that. Let's do a short intro to this framework. So essentially, there are three main visuals, and this is the best way to look at the framework, right? Is to look, okay, what are the visual representations that are going to help us doing better data management. And the three main visuals that we're going to look at today is the most popular one will be the DAMA wheel. Many of you, maybe you are not familiar with the framework, but you've seen the DAMA wheel before. The next one is the environmental factors hexagon. If you're familiar with the people, processes, technology framework, this is quite similar. And the last one is the knowledge areas context diagram. So those are the three main visuals within the framework. The first one is the DAMA wheel. This is the most popular one. This contains the different knowledge areas. So each slice in this visual represents a different knowledge area for data management. And you can see that at the center, we have data governance, because data governance is a component of each one of the knowledge areas, essentially. And it's required across all knowledge areas. As an example, so if you want to do data architecture, there'll be a component to it related to data governance. If you want to do data security, there is a really strong component of data governance as well. But there are two main ways of looking at this, right? So when you're thinking of establishing or improving the data management capabilities within your organization, you could actually look at specific knowledge areas. Let's be more specific. So let's say as part of the financial year 2024-2025, we want to improve our data quality capabilities. And you could look at, okay, what are the different steps that we can follow to improve our data quality capabilities? So when you go into the book, the DMBOK book, there'll be actually specific steps, recommendations, and guidelines and activities that you can take on to improve those data quality capabilities, essentially. So you can break it down knowledge area by knowledge area. You cannot focus on everything at the same time. So when you're looking at improving the data maturity of your organization, you will have to pick your battles. So choose the knowledge areas that are going to provide the most value within your organization and focus for a couple of years on improving those capabilities, essentially. I agree with you. All of them are important. All of them, we should look after all of them, but it's not realistic from a resources, time, and investment point of view to do everything at the same time. That's one way of looking at improving the data maturity of our organizations. I highly recommend, when you're looking at improving the data management practices within your organization, or you are looking at establishing a data management practice, to choose the ones that are going to provide the most value to the organization. The reality is that you are doing all of them, but in many cases, you haven't formalized them in a specific way. So you haven't created a specific policies, standards, and defined guidelines on how to do it. But I can tell you, you're doing all of it, but in many cases, it's not formalized, it's not I'm back. Okay. So I was saying this is one specific way of doing data management within the organization. It's essentially looking at a specific knowledge area, or I would recommend like a 2 or 3, and trying to improve the capabilities within those ones. The second option of looking at the DAMA wheel is from a project management point of view. So imagine that you're about to release or deploy a new application. So as part of that, deploying that application, and let's do a specific example. we want to build a data warehouse within the organization. We want to have a centralized repository with all our data so we can make informed decisions. So as part of building the data warehouse, you'll be touching on different knowledge areas. You will have to define an architecture for the data warehouse. Of course, you will have to build specific data models that serve specific business cases. You will have to define where you're going to store that information, how you're going to define the security and who is going to access which components of that data, how you're going to move the information between the different systems. It comes as part of the integration and interoperability. How you're going to manage some of the let's say the binary information, how you're going to manage content that may be seen, audio, videos, books, PDF files, the reference and master data, how you're going to maintain a master data of customers. I think you get the example. By just running a new project, and our example is building a data warehouse, you can actually look at all the components, all the knowledge areas of the DAMA wheel, and make sure that you tick as many boxes as you can. As a provider, right? So I do this for my clients a lot. In many cases, what happens when you're running a project is that it comes at a cost, right? So there's specific investment that the organization is going to make. And what is going to happen is that you are going to end up prioritizing some items and you're going to leave out of scope some of the other items. But at least make it an informed decision. So let's say that as part of building the data warehouse, we don't want to look at the metadata component. Make it an informed decision. Let leadership know what the risks are on making that decision, on leaving metadata out. So maybe in a couple of years, you can revisit that data warehouse solution to improve the metadata capabilities of it. This is, as I mentioned before, to summarize, the most popular visual within the data management framework. And remember, two different ways of looking at this. One is from organizational capabilities. So what are the capabilities that you want to improve? And the second one is from a project management point of view. So when you're building a new solution, you can actually tick as many boxes as you want. The next visual is the environmental factors hexagon. This, many times, is overlooked, but somehow there has been a huge hype during the past few years, I'll say 3 to 4 years, about change management. And change management is the practice of helping employees, individuals, and organizations change, move from point A to point B. And I think that this visual represents quite well the combination of people, processes, and technology, as well as the goals, principles, and the one that I like the most is the organization and culture. You really have to master what the culture of your organization is to understand how capable we're going to be on improving our capabilities in any of the knowledge areas, put it that way. So understanding where we sit in regards to change management and culture is really important for you to define achievable goals and principles that you can actually accomplish within your organization. We mentioned this before, so there's a really high turnover within our industry. So we'll have to make decisions, actually, that take into account that external factor as a risk, so we can define achievable, measurable, and relative goals as part of this nice visual here. This one, I think this visual is not as important in regards to other frameworks. So if you've heard of the People Processes Technology framework, this is a tailored version for the data management framework. And the next one, the third visual, is the knowledge area context diagram. And each knowledge area, and with knowledge area, I mean the one that we saw as part of the DAMA wheel, where we have data architecture, data warehousing and business intelligence, data security, metadata, and so on. So each knowledge area is going to have a context diagram that talks about the definitions and goals. And then if you've done ITIL, this will be really familiar, or anything related to processes, this will be really familiar. So there'll be inputs, there'll be the suppliers for those inputs, there'll be activities that you're going to perform and people who are going to be involved for you to get a specific output and consumers. So this context diagram is just an example on how the information is broken within different sections. And of course, you will have a specific technical and business drivers feeding into those activities. So this sample context diagram can actually be applied to all the knowledge areas within the data management framework. So let's look at a few examples. So if you were going to do data warehousing and business intelligence, you will have a definition and goals. Those ones will be specific to data warehousing and business intelligence. You will have different inputs and suppliers of those inputs that you want to take into account. And here you can see clearly that we have a specific business requirements as well IT strategy, because we really want to support the business goals as part of doing improving our data warehousing and BI, business intelligence capabilities. Then there'll be activities and people who are going to involve in those activities, specific outputs for doing data warehousing and business intelligence, and you will have the tools and technical drivers and so on. So this is an example of the context diagram being applied to a knowledge area. And there'll be one context diagram per each knowledge area. So that means that the diagram is really handy for you to understand what you need to do, who is going to be involved, and what are going to be the outputs for improving a specific capability within data management. What happens many times is that we make the decision on not following the best practices and guidelines of a framework. In reality, I'll show you how this might work, okay? So our organization wants to build a data warehouse and business intelligence. Why do we want to do that? So in many cases, the explanation will be, no, because we want to centralize all the data so we can make informed decisions. Then that's a really common explanation in any business on why we need a data warehouse. But encourage you to go a little bit further, actually, because here in the context diagram, we're talking about the specific business requirements. So we really want to know what are the business questions that we're going to answer with having a data warehouse and business intelligence capabilities. Because in some cases, maybe having the data warehouse is not the solution, right? So you can see that it's because of the lack of maturity of the data industry that in many cases, we start removing things from the inputs, the activities, or the thing that we have to deliver. You can see a different example here. As part of the the outputs of data warehousing and business intelligence, there's a BI activity monitoring. So this essentially means that we want to measure and monitor who is using our platform. So we have spent 6 months or a year building a data warehouse, bringing these amazing tools like Power BI, and we have a database, and everything looks great, but nobody's using the platform. I've seen it so many times. I've seen this so many times when they get a provider involved to build the data warehouse, and then we find out that nobody's using the application. This is something that has to be considered from the get-go. And if we're not going to do BI and activity monitoring, at least we have to raise this to leadership so they can make an informed decision to see if they want to invest on having monitoring or not. So quick example about the context diagram for data warehousing and business intelligence, but we also included a few more examples about different knowledge areas that are close to community services. So data integration and interoperability is basically managing how we move data across different systems to systems, or systems to providers. I won't go into detail into some of these context diagrams, but we really wanted you to have this as part of the video. And if you want to take a screenshot, or this will be available in the video as well, in the recording after. We also included data quality management. And we have included, I believe, one or two more. One is reference and master data. You can see that if I have to go all of them in detail, we'll finish here by after lunchtime, Brisbane time. And of course, one that I like a lot is having those data architecture capabilities that you see here. Now, if you are thinking that I came up with all of this, that's not true, actually. This is already available in the framework. So I'd like to talk a little bit about where to get information from that specific framework. So the DMBOK, the Data Management Framework, is the specific book that contains the guidelines, best practices, and recommendations for improving data management. And it provides essentially a functional framework. It will tell you what to do, what to take into account, what are some of the activities. It will not go into the detail, in many cases, on how to do it. It will provide recommendations on the steps, step number 1, step number 2, the different activities. But when it comes to the how, you will have to essentially get additional reference information on how to achieve it. If you want to become a certified data management practitioner, this is a certification available out there. So the DMBOK is going to help you with that. And it's going to help you as well establish a common language when talking about data, which is quite beneficial. So it talks, about the different data quality dimensions. It covers a lot of ground in regards to vocabulary that you can use. The structure of the book, essentially most chapters, most knowledge areas, because the book is going to be organized based on the knowledge areas. It's going to provide an introduction, activities that you can execute, what are some of the tools that you have to take into account without having to go, this is technology agnostic. So it will tell you what tools, capabilities you want to get, techniques, implementation guidelines, data governance, and metrics to measure the progress. Let me know if you have any questions in the chat so far. I will show you a snapshot of the book too. Anybody of you has the book? So can you put in the chat if you thought you have it or you thought about getting the book in the past? This book specifically. Can you put a yes or no in the chat, please? No? Okay. So now, if you don't want to be the person, who is going to become a certified data practitioner, I would say this is a really nice gift to give to somebody in your organization who is looking at the data sides. It could be a manager, a team leader. It could be somebody part of the data analytics team. I really recommend people to get the books for themselves if they want to uplift their data skills, or maybe to one practitioner within your organization. So each book, as you will see in this slide, has different chapters. It has one per each knowledge area, and then it has additional chapters to look at other topics that are really important as well, that are not part of the DAMA wheel. When you were looking at the DAMA wheel, one of the knowledge areas that we don't have in there is related, as an example, it could be artificial intelligence and machine learning. So that's not part of the knowledge area because I would say that the book is a little bit outdated. So it was published before the hype about AI and machine learning. So there'll be a chapter per each one of the knowledge areas. When you look at the book, and I'm going to reshare my screen. Let me share a different screen. So when you get the book, you can get the PDF version or the physical version. I don't get any commission for you buying this book. It's a really nice reference. I always recommend having the PDF version because you can easily browse it and navigate within your laptop when you're working. But if you prefer the physical version, that's good. You can even have the two versions. So in the book, you will see on the right side that is organized by different knowledge areas. So if you wanted to improve your capabilities in regards to data warehousing and business intelligence, you just need to come to this chapter. You don't have to go to any of the other chapters. And in here, essentially, you will have the drivers, the principles, the different term definitions. And then you will come to say, okay, what are some of the activities that you have to execute? And it will tell you essentially what are some of the considerations that you have to take into account as part of those activities. This is not a book that you read end to end. It is impossible. It'll be a nightmare. It is a book that serves the purpose of helping you improving specific areas of data management, essentially. The same happens, you can see as I go to a different section, let's say that we want to improve how we do data integration and interoperability, you will see that the way that this is organized is quite similar. The reason why is sometimes the names don't match. So you can see section number 6 is data governance. So this is the same, but let me tell you a few things about this book that are really, really amazing. So this book actually was written by a really large number of data practitioners, and it references actually many other books that have been written in the past. So you can see that as part of chapter 1, these are all the books that are being referenced as part of the framework. The same happens with the other chapters. So if we go to data warehousing and business intelligence, you will see that the information in the framework, it will reference many of the books written in the past as such, which sometimes when you want to expand in detail on specific activities, if you wanted to build a data model for your data warehouse and you wanted to get more detail, you will go and get one of the recommended books as part of the data management framework as such. But on top of that, so if you are thinking about doing the exam and becoming a certified data management practitioner, the exam is essentially open book. So having the PDF version, I always say that it's nice because you can easily navigate the different areas to answer a question of the exam. But let me summarize what the book, how we should be using the book, essentially. So let's say that you wanted to improve the capability of data security. So here you have a lot of recommendations, tools, and activities that you can follow to improve those data capabilities. And it really aligns with current practices, put it this way. In my case, when I started to have a look at this book, I found out that many of the things that I was already doing, they were already aligned with the framework. The challenge that I had is that it was not, I didn't feel that, I had something that was able to support me. I didn't have a specific set of guidelines and recommendations that I was following. So nowadays, every time that I do anything related to data practices, I align it with this framework. And if I don't align it to this framework, I'm making an informed decision. And in many cases, I'm taking the risk on doing that. So I'm cautious of time. So, but let me give you a few recommendations that I always take into account when doing data management. So where do we start from? Because we have many knowledge areas. The book is really long. We have limited resources, capabilities, and so on. So I would say, look, whatever you do, make sure that it aligns with the business strategy, and it is either increasing the revenue, decreasing the cost, or there is a regulatory compliance reason for doing that. Make sure that whatever you do aligns with the vision of leadership. It has to be aligned with what leadership wants to do, not only because it is something we want to do within our team. So just make sure that whatever we do, it aligns with something that is going to provide value to the organization. The next one is the most important one. So all of us will have limited resources, time, and capabilities within our organization. I highly recommend you improve your data management practice by formalizing some of the processes that you have. And that comes at start creating some of the policies, standards, procedures that you're already doing. So you're already operating as an organization. So just spend some time on trying to formalize some of those practices. And that's going to help you as well mitigate some of the challenges related to high turnover and onboarding process within our organization. Start small. I know that many organizations don't really have a really big budget for doing data management, but if you start small, as an example of a small project, could be having a data dictionary, having a nice report that shows data from 2 or 3 systems, and you can easily do that with Power BI, and show the value to leadership. So next financial year, you can put a business case for increasing that investment, and of course, measure progress. So whatever you do, you want to have a current snapshot. So this is where we start from, and this is what we have achieved when we finish the financial year. And finally, this is a common approach for data management projects. identify use case, define the governing rules, standards, and policies, and operating model. This is all related to project management. Put a strong emphasis on change management. There's not anything more valuable than helping our current employees becoming more literate at data or IT, and then you roll out the new capability. It's not about the tools, it's about the people using the tools. Any provider can go and deploy Power BI within your organization, but driving adoption of Power BI and helping your employees using the tool is where the real value is. To summarize, so if you are thinking about doing data management within your organization, or you want to know how to do better data management, I highly recommend having a look at the DAMA-DMBOK book. It's an investment that is going to pay off. Buying the book is going to pay off on improving your productivity, improving the productivity of your organization, or having better conversations at your leadership meetings. And we're going to leave some couple of minutes for Q&A, but if you want to stay connected with me or with your data management peers in other organizations, we also have the DAMA branch running in Brisbane. We mostly run free events, and that's all. Yeah. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. We'll go through them. If you want to know more about the data management branch in Brisbane or in Australia, connect with me. We're going to make this video available in the YouTube channel. Is that right, Tammy and Nadia?
Yes, the recording and the slides will be sent out in the post-webinar resources, and it will be on our Community Door resource page for the Research and Evaluation Network.
Okay. Look, thank you, Nadia and Amy, for organizing this event. I'm going to hand it over back to you, Nadia. I know we covered a lot of content, and it's mostly, I know it's boring, but yeah, I'll stay online a few more minutes if you have any questions.
No problem. So if you do have questions, pop them in the chat. We'll be able to answer them or follow up afterwards. All right. We'd also ask everyone to now participate in a poll. We'd love to hear your feedback about the session and how it went. That's really valuable for our network. Lots of thank yous for David. That was a very good presentation.
It was challenging to make it fun, you know.
You did very well. Right, so while everyone is filling out the poll and asking questions in the chat, might just move on to a few notes about the Research and Evaluation Network. So if you're new to our network, you may want to review our terms of reference, which will be sent out in the post-webinar email. The terms of reference we review annually and update as needed, so please reach out if you'd like to discuss the terms of reference or provide feedback. Our email address will be in the chat. In terms of membership, network meetings and webinars are open to everyone as they are about sharing resources and collaboration. However, social service staff in research and evaluation roles are particularly encouraged to attend. Our aim is to deliver a community of practice that promotes collaboration, sharing of knowledge in relation to evaluation methodologies, and outcome measurement for community services. Our network adopts a strength-based participatory focus that leverages, draws on, and values current knowledge, expertise, and capabilities that exist within the sector. A reminder that we do have a Teams forum for the network, which sits within Microsoft Teams. There'll be details about how you can join in the chat pane. The idea behind the forum is that we are providing a space and an opportunity for our network members to collaborate, exchange ideas, and to access professional development opportunities. It's also one way to stay up to date with our news about the network. And as David said, you can access our Research and Evaluation Network webinar recordings and resources on our Community Door page, the Research and Evaluation Resources Hub page, and the link will be in the chat now. And there's also a YouTube playlist linked within the page. So up to our upcoming events now. QCOS welcomes you to join us for our first webinar for 2025 for the Domestic, Family and Sexual Violence DFSV Data Insights Network, commissioned by the Department of Families, Seniors, Disability Service and Child Safety. The network is convened and facilitated by QCOS. Data is instrumental in improving the safety of women and their children and ensuring effective program and policy design and return on government investment. In this session, we will outline what's possible with using data in government and how data can help inform policy development, effective program design and redesign, investment and commissioning, and monitoring outcomes. We hope you can join us for the first webinar of the year for the DFSV Data Insights Network, and I'll share the details and links in the chat with you now. We would also like to invite you to our next Research and Evaluation Network webinar, which will be a research lightning round. We will be joined by community service professionals leading innovative research across diverse service sectors, including children and young people, emergency outreach responses, disability and health. The link for the registration should be in the chat now. And the QCOS Quality Collaboration Network, QCN, is also having an upcoming day workshop on generative AI for community services. And David mentioned a few times in his presentation how generative AI is really advancing and coming into our sector. The day will cover key topics such as governance basics, effective and ethical use of AI tools, and introduce off-the-shelf resources that may be suitable for use by community organizations. The details will be in the chat. And lastly, we would also like to share this invitation with you from the Human Technology Institute team at the University of Technology, Sydney. The HTI team are working with the Australian Government's National AI Centre to develop the next version of the Voluntary AI Safety Standard. They are looking to speak with small, medium organisations to gather feedback on AI procurement challenges they are facing. So if you're interested in providing feedback to ensure that the procurement guidance is easy to understand and implement, please contact Mivan Wei Woolwork, the AI governance lead at HTI, by the 21st of February. Those details are also in the chat. And so thank you for staying online and engaging with us in today's session. There may be a delay in the uploading of the recording for this session as members of our communication team are on annual leave this month, but it will be uploaded. Our contact details are on the slide and again in the chat if you would like to reach out to us to provide feedback or ask any questions. So thank you everyone. Have a good day.